Hello. I have some questions which I will talk about, and maybe you'll find some answers in what I have to say. So I'll get straight on with it. I have one question, a nice question from Withers. Can I follow the 5 precepts and meditate 10 minutes a day casually to be Buddhist? Yes, Withers, you can. I might suggest you try and meditate a little more than 10 minutes each day. Understandably, many people are short of time, so one way to make time for meditation, and also to ensure that you are meditating at the best time of day, is to wake up 1 hour earlier. It is better to meditate first thing in the morning before you busy your mind with other activities. It's also nice to meditate at the end of the day to help you relax and get over your day, really, and put you in a calmer mind state ready for your rest. But this is really just relaxation, and often meditation time can be taken up with thinking about your day. First thing in the morning, before you do anything else, your mind is clear of yesterday's activity. You may be thinking about the day ahead, but just leave that for the future and try and leave the past in the past. Wake up an hour earlier, and then you should have plenty of time to meditate for at least 40, 50, or even an hour minutes in the morning. Following the 5 precepts isn't quite as easy as it sounds, but if you can manage to do that, then you are very much practicing the Noble Eightfold Path of Sila, which is keeping the 5 precepts of no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. And of course, with meditation, you are developing wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states by practicing samadhi, meditation, developing the power to focus your mind on one meditation object, in order that when you go about your everyday activities, you are more focused on those, more aware. Your attention is more stable on each and everything you do. You are seeing clearly what is going on around you, and this is sati, or mindfulness, sometimes known as vipassana. So with us, it sounds to me you certainly are practicing the Buddhist path, or striving in the right direction in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha. And the third aspect of that Noble Eightfold Path is developing wisdom, which you will develop from firstly keeping those moral virtues and through practicing meditation. But you could also take some time to read the suttas, the Buddhist scriptures. You could Google online to find various sources of relevant Buddhist literature. If they are a little heavy at first, one can also listen to Dharma talks. You can read biographies of monks that have been around and lived in the past, because of course these teachings are not dated. They've been around for 2,566 years, so are as relevant today as they were then, and there are many masters in the practice whom have lived over the decades and centuries, and now their biographies are in print or available online, and a very useful introduction to the Dharma, to see how those great masters lived their lives, putting this practice into the practice of existence, how we live day to day with the teachings of the Buddha. But you don't need to really think, oh, am I a Buddhist or aren't I a Buddhist? Remember, the Buddha's name was not Buddha, it means awakened one. He was a man, and we refer to him as the Buddha, and we refer to the practice of his teaching as, or the study of his teachings as Buddhism, and as a group, as a religion, Buddhists. These are just words for conventionality's sake. One could be of another religion to some extent and practice meditation, keeping these 5 particular moral virtues, and in a way you're a Buddhist, if not in name, certainly in nature. But it isn't to be overthought. Just relax, do the practice. You see, I was a Buddhist, I think, a long time before I'd understood the meaning of the word Buddhist. I was practicing, I was living as a monk, I was meditating, I was trying to keep precepts, but I didn't know that was called Buddhism. It was only later on that activity led me towards the teachings of the Buddha. But I think that comes up in another question that I'm coming to, so I'll go on to discuss that a little further shortly. So I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy that you are trying to do that, keep those precepts and practice some meditation. 10 minutes is fine, but it's not really long enough. It can take that long really just to relax the body, sit and settle. And the whole aim is to try and bring one's attention to the meditation object of your choice, and one can't really do that. Even if you can do that within 10 minutes, you don't have long enough to hold that attention to gain any benefit. So try and extend the time to an hour. Okay, so I'm going to go on to Gregory, who has sent me in a number of questions. Again, I didn't check the time before I started. We'll see how this goes. And I've given Gregory some quite short answers because he already knows me, and I can be a little abrupt sometimes with my answers, because when it is the truth, there is no beating around the bush, no prevarication. It's unnecessary. But of course, sometimes people like to hear a little bit more flowery stuff around an answer. But I'll give it to you as I've given it to Gregory. And the first question is, which suttas impressed you when you first discovered the Dharma? And my answer is none. Does that surprise you? Maybe not. No. Reason being, like I just explained really, I discovered the Dharma before I really discovered Buddhism. But more specifically, I discovered the Dharma through Buddhist monastics. I say monastics because yes, the first Dharma talks I heard were from both Buddhist monks and nuns in English, my mother tongue, and I always think that is the best way to first listen to the Dharma. In fact, always, continually, if it is available to you, to listen to the Dharma in your own language, if it is available, or by people whom speak your own language very, very well. Otherwise it loses some of its potency. But firstly, I discovered it through Buddhist monks. And then going on to your second question, what are your favourite suttas now? Well, now, of course, I have studied the suttas to some extent, not as fully as many, and I certainly don't quote from them that often. I don't know the relevant numbers and titles of them all, but I use them in my understanding of the Buddha's teachings, and I use them to help me tell others about the Buddha's teachings. So what are my favourite suttas now? I've got another rather short and curt and maybe facetious answer, but all of them. Why? Because they are the words of the Buddha. They are the truth. The Buddha teaches the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path in many, many ways. 84,000 suttas, all teaching the same thing, but to do different kinds of people in different circumstances, which was why there are so many variations on the teachings. But the more we read of them, the more we can find in each and every one of them the beauty of how the Buddha taught. For remember, he taught for 45 years. Yes, 35 until 80 odd. So yes, about 45 years. So there are very many, many discourses of the Buddha one can read, and they were given to many different kinds of people. So they're all beautiful. And I have to say, I don't have one particular favourite. If you had a music collection, we're coming on to music soon, you'd have different kinds of music to listen to for different moods on at different times. You don't just listen to one record all of the time. You may have a favourite, but you probably more than likely have a few favourites. And that is similar with the suttas, which have to replace music after all, as you'll see in a minute. Question 3. I hope that answers question 2. What are your favourite suttas? Yes. Which definitive turning stages of Which definitive turning stages of nibbida? Nibbida means the eradication of, or disenchantment. You let go of all of the things you formerly, you may still crave to some extent, but you become disenchanted by them, so you become liberated from their draw. If I go on to finish the question, it might explain it a little better. Gregory explains it a little better than I do, actually. Which definitive turning stages of nibbida and world weariness, so it means that really, led you to the urgently, resolutely and decisively seeking of answers in the Dharma? Yes. So I think you're saying, Gregory, what turned my head and made me become a monk? Can I read my answer? Because I can't remember this answer. The answer to that is disenchantment in everything. When I say everything, I mean disenchantment in everything I was doing to be happy. So remember, I was a lay person leading a good life. I had much of everything I needed and wanted available to me. I didn't have to work hard, apart from working hard to enjoy myself, and this was my situation. So to continue with my answer, discovering only contentment brings happiness and is not found in things, but it is found in no things. I realized nothing or no thing is happiness, not everything. So I realized I was acquiring things. I was changing things, replacing things, upgrading, updating, craving, going and getting. None of it was making me content, it was just bringing me more discontentment, because I was then seeking the next best thing. And this is the nature of all of us. This is the nature of craving and desire, and what is the root cause of all suffering. And through the practice of sila and samadhi, you develop the wisdom to understand that there is no satisfying these cravings. There is no satisfaction. What was his name? Mick Jagger sang a song, "I can't get no satisfaction." He was a major rock star of his time. All of the money and the things materialistic you could ever wish for, materialistically you could ever wish for, dancing around there. "I can't get no satisfaction" was his song, a great hit. Why? Because it's so true. I wasn't that guy. I was an ordinary fellow, dissatisfied, and I learnt that this was what we call dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Why? Because everything is impermanent and out of our control. These are those three things: anicca, impermanence; dukkha, suffering; and anatta, not self or out of our control. And on this realization, what was the question? Yes, was that realization that nothing was bringing me the happiness, just more discontentment, and that when I renounced, I gave those things up, I found a simple life which brought about with it contentment, and thereafter happiness. And then eventually I became a monk. Actually, your questions, Gregory, beautifully lead on to the next. So I think after these questions we will leave this talk for this evening. You see, it's evening rather than daytime for a change. There is a reason behind that. So question number 4. Did you seek out spirituality in other faiths first? What worked and what wasn't sufficient, or what was lacking? So my answer was no. I went and lived alone in the forest. Actually, I won't say that's a lie, because of course I'd be breaking the 4th precept if I lied, but I forgot, let's say, to say that maybe I did look around a little bit. I was already a Christian by birth, really, I suppose, an upbringing in a Catholic school, monastery, and I was disenchanted with Catholicism a long time ago, so I was exploring a little bit, I suppose, at this time of my life. What do we call it? The Anglican Church, the Church of England. What we call ordinary Christianity, I suppose. And reading the Bible, and quite interested in those teachings. A lot of similarities there. Oh, I won't go into that. That opens a can of worms, that subject. But yeah, there wasn't a great deal there for me to change my life. In fact, some of it encouraged a lot more of the activities I was trying to renounce. But without going into detail of that, I mean, I went and stayed in a Benedictine monastery for a little while, which was my first taste of living in an austere monastic environment, really. But it was close to a forest where I was hanging out, let's say. But I kind of decided to just give everything up on the spur of the moment. It was around a Christmas time. It was winter, not a good time to do it. And for some reason I was living, it was between places where I was living, so I was staying various different places at the time, and I thought, this isn't necessary, I can just go and live in the forest, which was a bit rash, but I did, and I did it for quite some time. And it was an amazing and a wonderful retreat experience. In fact, I've never been on a formal retreat. I've helped in retreats in monasteries when they've been given to the public, but myself, I've never been on a meditation retreat. I went straight into monasticism and monasteries to stay, and I'm still here. But this was a retreat that I was doing, and it involved also some kind of employment I would find around those environments, whereby I could seek out little huts to stay in without the employers knowing necessarily, but they did come eventually to know that I was living on the job. But the nature of the work, it was better for them, and it became appropriate. And this is what I did. So yeah, I did explore a little bit of Christianity, or I was already a Christian. I went into it. It wasn't quite putting me in the right direction, so I just gave everything up and went and lived in the forest, foraging for my food, grabbing what I could, hunting a little bit, because in those days I wasn't, this is a long time ago, remember, I wasn't a Buddhist, and you know, as a Christian, one isn't prohibited in the commandments to gather one's own food by whatever means, humanely of course, and I only ate ever what I caught, fishing or whatever. We won't go into that. Another one of these stories for the biography, I suppose, which is never happening. Number 5, another question. So did I answer that? Yes. Did you seek out spiritual and other faiths? A little. I've answered it. Number 5. What do you miss, or did you miss, from the lay world? So as renunciants, we give everything up. But certainly I don't miss any of the material things that I gave up. But the things that come in the 8 precepts are the difficult ones. So the 5 precepts turn into the 3rd precept. I'll just say the 5 first. No killing. Well, I'd stopped that hunting business a long time before I came to this. So I'd already become vegetarian for quite a few years before I was even considering becoming a monk. Probably at least 5 years I was a vegetarian, and also intoxicants, at least 5 years before I was considering becoming a monk. I'd given up drinking. So number 5 and number 1, there was no killing and no intoxicants a long time before I even considered becoming a monk. In fact, when I went to live in the forest is where I gave up all those things. Number 3 becomes, we become celibate. It's not just sexual misconduct, we give up all sexual activity. And I suppose at first that's difficult for anybody, but this is something that with time one establishes and gets used to, this new environment. The environment you're in is not conducive to that kind of thing anyway, and you're to some extent protected from the outside world, so not so much an issue, and we are taught how to deal with our experiences, and there's also a video on here all about that, so I won't say any more about that. Number 4, lying. If anything, I've always been too honest. I've never been a great liar. I get into a lot of problems, if anything, through through honesty, you know, saying how I think, what I think. Sometimes in the outside world that isn't appropriate, and in this world it sometimes isn't appropriate. And even just recently I've upset someone in a reply to an email. I wasn't aware fully of the situation. I answered the questions bluntly and truthfully in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha, but this caused this individual considerable distress, I understand. But I'm concerned about that, but I can do nothing about that. I answered some relatively simple questions, as I understand the situation. So right speech is not the same as number 4, lying. Right speech, the third of the Noble Eightfold Path, covers not using divisive speech, not gossiping, not upsetting someone with hurtful speech, which would be something I perhaps done inadvertently. So without intention, therefore, without intention, you have always got, you can still feel some remorse, but it wasn't your intention. And all of these precepts have intention behind them for you to break them. But with respect to that 4th, lying, I didn't have a problem giving that up. I've already mentioned 5. There was no problem giving up alcohol or cigarettes or marijuana. Those things I'd given up many years before. Number 6, eating in the afternoon. Also before becoming a monk, or before even staying in the monastery for the first time, I'd given up eating in the afternoon. And it's something you get used to, and you actually find actually makes your life... Sorry, 2 actuallys in a row. I've lived in India for a long time. You get used to it, and you get used to not eating in the afternoon. So it wasn't something that's bothered me much. But then come the difficult ones. Well, the 2 difficult ones are food and sexuality are the difficult ones, logically speaking, but the hardest one is entertainment, in number 7. Because under beautification and adornments and this kind of thing, they add in on number 7 with the 8 precepts, which is what you have when you first just stay in a monastery, just 8 precepts. Which are really 9, because when they become 10 precepts, when you go to live in a monastery as opposed to stay in a monastery, that was a gecko fighting. In case you wondered why I went like this, you might not have heard it, but I did. It made a very funny noise. The 8 precepts become 10 precepts by the adornments and beautification and entertainment splitting into 2, and then the addition of number 10, which is you cannot use money. So 10 precepts are no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, intoxicants, eating in the afternoon, beautification, entertainment, lying in a luxurious bed, or using money. I think that's 10. I was fortunately counting on the hand with all of my fingers, because when I do it on that hand, which I incidentally did when I was living in the forest, and there is a video answering that question also, I was cutting wood, and I cut my finger off. It's nothing more complicated than that. And that wasn't hard to give up. It's still there as far as I'm concerned. When you cut something off, it still feels like it's there. This is how deceitful these bodies are to us. Yes, we think these bodies are us. They're really not. You only have to cut something off, just your fingernails, to know that, or just your hair to know that. It's there, it's on the floor. It's not you, is it? We do in Thailand, a lot of Marananusati, so death contemplation, and it's also a Suba practice, which is the opposite of contemplating beautiful things. Suba is beautiful, Asuba is not beautiful. So we contemplate the not beautiful, which is a way that one counteracts, say, attraction and sexual desire, or desire for food, by considering, contemplating, thinking about the unbeautiful nature of all these things. So, for instance, if you were to peel the skin off the opposite or the person you're attracted to, they wouldn't look very nice. If you were to chew some of your food out and spit it out on the plate again, it wouldn't look very nice. Both of those things that you desired are no longer desirable, just from looking, seeing. This is a Suba practice. And with death contemplation, we get in Thailand to see, just yesterday I went to see another dead person, and we go to the funeral and they open the coffin and we have to stand and look, and they do this little ritual. The lay people do this ritual with the body. I won't go into that because I don't understand it enough to explain. I need someone to explain that ritual to me. It clearly means something important, but it's quite an unusual thing for a Western person to witness. And we look at the body, and you try and imagine a personality in that. It's quite impossible. I mean, I haven't known these people I've seen that are dead. But when someone's been dead for a week or so, I've seen dead people whom I've known, who've just died, and a bit after, when they've been quite nicely made up in, let's say, UK funeral places. But they leave them a little bit more natural in some places in Asian countries, and you can't really put the personality of that person into that body. And this is how deceitful our bodies are. So I haven't answered the question yet, have I? Entertainment, music. This was the hardest thing to give up for me in the lay world, and I understand it was for you too, Gregory, when you were on the 8 precepts also. So music, yes, because it's very difficult. I had all sorts of things to do with music. We won't go into that, but it was very much my life for all of my life. But then at one point it was all my life. I was working in the industry and doing all sorts of things with music, and very interested in music, and I love music. But one can't listen to music, and I'd already discovered meditation and found that as I was gradually, without renouncing music, becoming disenchanted, that nibbida word again, with music, I found that I was going through my playlist and flicking through the tracks, never listening to a track to its end, and quickly becoming bored and going on to the next one. And this told me something. Then I was buying another music, the latest release or whatever of the artist involved, and then I was just no longer sitting and enjoying, I was just flicking through. And this is a sign of disenchantment, of nibbida. And clearly I began to give up music before I had to. But then when I did, tunes came to my head. They come to your head when you're meditating, and then one will stay for you for a long time. You may hear a tune outside by accident when you're not in a monastery, or someone may have something in their car playing and it's something familiar, and then that's in your head for days, it seems, if not weeks to come. So I did miss music. What do you miss, or did you miss? Yes, I don't now. And I might add, now if I hear some music that I used to like, yes, it just clicks straight away. Oh, yes, that tune, I like that tune. But very quickly, it becomes unsatisfactory. And yes, I can see why I liked it, but I don't want to be humming that now. They don't seem to sit. They don't seem to come and make themselves at home anymore, those tunes. They can come and they go, like other things. And I think it's just with time. But yeah, in answer, music was the hardest thing out of all of those things to give up. I mean, I'd really had no problem shaving all my hair off. I had long hair. Shaving that off and wearing simple clothes, getting rid of clothes. I didn't really wear jewellery or anything like that, and those sort of things didn't bother me at all. So it was only that. Okay, I've got to sort of move on a little bit more quickly now, although there's complicated questions, so I'll give blunt answers. What's your view of Buddha Ghosa's Path of Purification? So that book is otherwise known as the Visuddhimagga, a very popular kind of handbook, guide, commentary to the suttas on the Dharma, of how to live. It's the path of purification. You know, I don't have a view, I don't have an opinion, and That's all I need to say, really. It's another commentary. It's all there in the suttas, in the teachings of the Buddha. If you're living in a monastery, your superior monastics, your guides, your teachers are showing you the way as they are now. I've come back to living in a monastery. And okay, I don't see other monks much, but in the times when I do, they will be continuously guiding me, correcting me, putting me back on that path. And yes, I think, well, I was straying a little bit in the outside world. I wasn't in the outside world, I was a monk, but I was going from vihara to vihara, on tudong, from here to there, public transport, this and that. But now I'm back within the confines of the forest, in my little kuti here, and just the forest outside. There is a little beach, but it's, there's no people there, and nothing, just some rocks and sand and sea, and the mountain and the temple, and the sala, and alms round. I'm back on that path of purification. And really the minute you're back on it, it's like coming home. So I don't put a great store in. If I wasn't a monk, reading it in a book would be great, yes. But I became a monk before I really got into studying or reading about Buddhism. Or I was at least living in monasteries before I began really studying Buddhism. I was preferred to practice it, like when I was living in the forest alone, as a kind of a tramp, hippie, recluse, my way of renunciation. I was practicing, I wasn't reading about it. So yeah, I not really have a view on it, but I mean, that means I don't think one way or the other. It's a great read, and good for some people. There is also a whole school of thought as is whether it's correct, whether it's right, and this and that and the other. I'm not going to get into that debate, nor am I going to get into the debate on the next question, number 7, what's your view on jhanas? I don't have a view. I have made a video about jhanas, kind of. I'm not sure it's called jhanas, but there's a couple of videos about stages of samadhi leading to at least the first 4 jhanas, and I think I really give my view in that. I'll read my answer though. Jhanas I talk about somewhere, but again it is not for me. Okay, I talk about that somewhere, but again it is not for me or anyone to have a view, but to know from experience, and then that individual will develop right view for themselves. That was my written answer back to Gregory. What music did you... And finally, number 8, and Gregory did politely say you don't have to answer this one on at all or on here, but I'm going to because it's a good question. What music did you used to enjoy? And my answer was, that's irrelevant. No, I did say all kinds of music, actually. It was a whole very broad range of different kinds of music. And I also enjoyed singing a lot, and I don't get to do that, and I have to restrain that tendency to sing when chanting, especially in Thailand. In India you can get away with a little bit more. It's a bit more tuneful. Here it's very not tuneful, because it isn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be chanting. And yes, so that is the end of Gregory's questions, and I think that is where I have to leave it for today, for this evening. The reason I'm making this recording this evening is because I've had a little break for a couple of days of recording videos for no reason. I've now caught up on some of the questions, but because I haven't made any questions and answers videos, I still have a few more to answer. But I have answered all people's questions directly to them. So I don't always include them in these videos. It isn't always appropriate to do so. I pick questions to answer that I think are useful to everybody, everyone that might be listening. Some are a little bit too tailored to an individual, and the answer to that individual may be different to another individual, so not therefore appropriate as a general questions and answers kind of thing. But I hope just two questioners today, Gregory and Withers, I hope I've answered your questions clearly. I've done as best as I can, and to everyone else I hope it's also useful, and if it isn't, you can forget about it, but if it's useful, you can use it. So I hope you are happy and well, and your practice bears fruit in good time, and will wish you good night.